Utomi, who is a professor of economics and a very renowned technocrat in Nigeria. Thank you very much for joining us for this interview. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Yeah, so let's start from this. When President Buhari came into government in 2015, a lot of people did expect that he would, he would allow you or he would permit you join his government, but we didn't see any of that happen. Why didn't you, form part of the court of people that were supposed to join his administration?
Well, I guess you're asking the wrong person. I guess the person who was making decisions, President Buhari, not me. So I am not in a position to answer that question. But I think that I mean, this, in the Nigerian context, it seems awkward, but people don't seem to understand what motivates or drives a person like me. I have been involved in the challenge of nation building in Nigeria for at least 40 years. And my motives have always been very clear. Why am I in this? What am I trying to accomplish? First, as a student leader, back in the good old 70s, I mean, we were on the streets. We, wanted a better society and this and that. Went through that phase of our lives. My engagement in public life from very, very early. I mean, it was interesting that at the first meeting of the Nigeria intervention movement, Olisa Bakowa made the point that I dragged him into civil society life. Because when I came back from the US in 1982, I founded a group called CCC, Congress of Concerned Citizens. Young intellectuals, we used to gather around the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs and talk about how to change this country. Femi Aribisala, Baba Jimmy Peters, Mohammed Garba, and a number of us. During the intervening years, many of them got so frustrated, they left Nigeria. And my big joke is that of that group of about 20-something of us, only Femi Aribisala, Olisa Bakoba, and I eventually lived in Nigeria. All the others left the country. So during those years, I really agonized about seeing Nigeria go the wrong way. And I could visualize the future, the path Nigeria was traveling, and tried to articulate it in several ways. When the annulment of the elections of the 12th of June, 1993 took place, I wrote an article, an op-ed piece in The Guardian that was titled, "We Must Say Never Again." Because it's all about citizen apathy that allows a small group of people to capture a country. And that's the Nigerian problem. We're suffering from 50 odd years of state capture by a small group of people who use the resources of the Nigerian states that they have privatized to make it difficult. In fact, to actually prevent people who can help change Nigeria from entering the arena. And they've been very effective through the years. And the fact that Nigerians are somehow, well, they don't care much, has made it easy for them. So we began to mobilize. That came to be known as the concerned professionals. And there are more than a few books that suggest that concerned professionals played some of the most important role in chasing the military off. But we made one error. When the military was leaving, we didn't go into politics. It was a major, and I take personal responsibility. But principally two of us that canvassed that position, Tola Mobuluri and myself. The other fellows, like Donald Duke, went into politics because they didn't think, and they were right, with the benefit of hindsight. Now, but by the time it became very clear to us around 2003 that our judgment was wrong, because we expected that the traditional politicians, the followers of Awolowo, the followers of Okpara, Zik, Balewa, and co, would enter the arena. But they were not sure that the military was leaving, that the military was just playing the old game. And so they left this open space, and all kinds of charlatans and criminals took over the public space in Nigeria, and we've never recovered from it.
Yes, but this is time now to revamp the concerned professionals. This is time to drive them back into politics.
In many ways, the whole idea of the movement that is being created is to actually rebuild that concerned professionals, get people who think, get people who are pure citizens, not adventurers looking for power and money from politics, to come back into the public space. That's the whole idea of the movement. In the years after the return to civil rule and we saw things, my whole passion, my whole energy was a commitment towards building an opposition that could replace a government in power. And that got me involved with many groups. For a long time, it was trying to persuade Chifolu Falaye and Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu to be able to work together, and I was a ping pong going from one to the other and all of that. Well, eventually, when Ashibaju Bola Tinubu thought, okay, let's see if we can build a bridge to a group that, he called me, we were all, and we tried very hard to make that happen. It's a longer story of many things that happened. Then the elections were won, and there were other directions that things traveled. As far as I was concerned, I had played my part. The other part was, yes, we could show light of what direction government should travel, but it didn't seem that those who, as it were, captured the state shared the same kind of ideas as we had about how to take society forward.
Now you yourself, Donald Duke and Olisa Bakoba have come together to form the Nigerian intervention movement. It's one thing to form a movement, and it's another thing to see through it to the end and ensure that it accomplishes, the reasons why it was built in the first place. Now, the three of you have most Nigerians seem to understand that the three of you are just on this high pedestal, How do you intend to come down from that very high mount and get actually involved in these things?
That's often said, people on high pedestals, but I have been on the streets, I have been in remote villages and all of that. If the truth be told by anybody who bothers to do serious analysis, nobody campaigned like I did in 2007. Whereas the big political parties were filling stadiums with hired people, and I went town to town. I think I was probably the only person who ran for president in 2007 who went to every single state of the federation. But I remember very clearly arriving in Taraba and going to the governor's office. Usually make a call on the governor and then a traditional ruler, and the governor saying, actually the governor wasn't there, it was deputy governor that met us, because it was Jolly Nyame who was governor, or it was him, Reverend gentleman. He was not in town, his deputy met us. I said, you are the first presidential candidate to show up in this place. Apparently no other person running for president thought Taraba was worth visiting. But we drove, and then when we came, we started from Meduguri, flew to Meduguri, and then started coming down all the states in the northeast corridor coming down. When we got to Yola, Adamawa, Boni Haruna was the governor at the time, and Boni Haruna looked at the cars we were traveling in and said, you people don't know this neighborhood, these cars won't survive this, you need some jeeps. And then, remarkably, he asked his people to give us some jeeps so that we could continue. And that was, he was PDP governor, and we were running under the ADC platform. So the point is, there's no high pedestal at all. But you've got to set an agenda. You've got to elevate this conversation. Sometimes you get the impression that Nigerians don't want to be free of what they are in. On the one hand, they say, yes, we are in shackles, nothing is happening. Then when you come up with ideas, they say, this is highfalutin, people have used money, they did. Look, the Philippines was in worse shape when a group of ordinary women with rosaries sat on the streets praying, and a powerful Marcos decided to send tanks on them. And the soldiers took a look at these small women with their candles and their rosary beads and turned the tanks on the palace. That's how the Marcos legacy ended. But Nigerians just seem to feel helpless. Oh, well, this our country is being badly run. What can we do?
We all come from different backgrounds. That's what unites us. We all know life is about freedom of choice, and money transfer should be the same way. Introducing MoneyGram My Way. Send and receive money just about anywhere, using whatever method that works best for you.
So you contested, you were the founder of the African Democratic Congress, ADC, and eventually its presidential candidate. And later on, you decamped to the APC. Do we have to use the word decamped? Oh yeah, you decamped to APC. And would be contesting for governorship position in Delta State under the same APC. What's the reason behind your movement from ADC, which you founded, to the APC?
Well, first of all, I've never founded anything. A group of people found things. We're all involved in a process. The idea was to be able to bring a number of parties together. We were accused of, oh, you run under a small party, it's just making a point, it does not run in to win. So, okay, we're not against big parties. We want to build an agenda, to raise. So we agreed that we would come together, bring many parties together, and we decided to move into ACN. Of course, some people did not want that. So ADC remains and continues to function, but we thought, let's go into a bigger umbrella, because my goal, personal goal, was to create a viable opposition. And we began working with Chief Anthony Nahoro at the time for this purpose. What was created became the mega democratic movement. That traveled one direction. Again, my ping pong between Chief Falaye and Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu was that effort to bring the groups together. There was reluctance, this side, and I was committed to mainstream, to building the bigger. And that's how we became part of ACN and part of APC. So I have never, quote unquote, decamped. I've always been focused on how to build a formidable opposition.
Is your interest in contesting for governorship elections in Delta State to be interpreted as that you are not capable, you don't have confidence that you can win presidential elections, because you did contest for presidential elections and now you're, so to speak, downgrading to...
Again, you see, that's a weak Nigerian mindset. The governor of California today, Brown, when I was a student in America in the 70s, he was governor of California. In the intervening years, he became a councillor, an alderman. And more than 30 years after, came back to run for governor of California again, and is the incumbent governor. Somebody I was privileged to call a friend, former Prime Minister of France, Raymond Barre. His last position was as mayor of Lyon. So Nigerians think of positions not as service, but as, and that's the big problem with Nigerian public life. What has happened, for example, in Delta, is that over the last couple of years, groups of Deltas have been saying, look, our state is in such an unbelievable mess that if you look across the border, a small, well, a state like Anambra, which gets 2 point something billion naira in a month, that Delta will get 14 point something billion naira. The roads are in a great shape. You look across at Edo State, which will get 3 billion when Delta gets 14 billion. Roads are much more motorable. The schools are a lot better, and so on. We need to save our state. And in groups, they've been coming to say to me, look, we need for someone like you to run and change the course of things in Delta. You know, we can't leave our children to suffer this kind of misfortune. And I have said the same thing that I have always said. My favorite position in government is local government. If local government worked in Nigeria, the position I'd like to run for is not even chairman of local government, but councillor. And that all I need to see is seriousness that they want to see change. And whatever can contribute to change, I'll be very willing to. So I'm not picking and choosing. In fact, in my mindset of what leadership means, you don't ask to be a leader. People come and ask you to lead us. And that's why I've never asked to be anything. When I ran in 2007, because the concerned professionals worried that we had made a mistake in 1999, decided, look, let's set a new agenda. And they asked me to. I didn't say I want to run for president. The same thing happened. Chief Falaye and co. were the ones who said to me, you have to run.
Yes, but if Deltas, if, like you said, Deltas, a lot of Deltas want you to run for a certain position, and former governor of Delta State, Emmanuel Doha, says that he made you chairman of a lot of committees while he was in government, and there was nothing to show for those positions.
He's apologized for that, because that's not a correct statement. What committee? He couldn't say one. You know, the only committee that I ever served in Delta State was Drought Relief Committee, and I wasn't chairman of it. Not, is it drought? No, sorry. Flood, not drought. Flood Relief Committee. A Justice of Supreme Court was the chairman, and I was a member. That's the only committee I have ever served on in Delta State. It's a simple factual thing. Nothing can be, show what, Yeah. But I don't want to get into it because people want those kinds of backs and forth because it makes hot news. That's not a serious area to have conversation around. No.
You once served President Shehu Shagari as an advisor at a very young age. One of the dominant calls today is for young Nigerians to be allowed to run and to rule in present-day Nigeria. Do you think it will make any difference?
Well, it's not a matter of the age of a person. It's a matter of the person's ideas. A 19-year-old can have a great idea and change the world. A 90-year-old can do the same. But I think that it is important to give room for young people to grow. I got a break. I was 27 when I was in that kind of position. Why shouldn't another 27-year-old or a 25-year-old do more than that? Yes, I think it's important, but the generation must, decide what its cause is, what its purpose is, and try to make that happen.
Are you satisfied with the quality of youth out there today in the country?
Look, it is not a fair statement to label a generation. They are different people. I've met some of the most brilliant people that I've ever met in my life from the so-called youth of today. I've met some very passionate, some very committed people. And this is my office. This place used to be clogged with many of them. In fact, Chude Jidon, in one of his remarks, said that whenever they came to see me, himself, Debola Williams and co., they would be on a long queue of many young people who have come with ideas, with all kinds of things. And I've seen some really brilliant people who have done things. So to say satisfied with the youth out there, it's not a fair comment, because there are many good young people. There are the culture of the time also has affected many young people. This age of instant gratification. There are many people who just want their rewards now. Where's their four-wheel drive? But doesn't mean that they're not.
So you think that if the youths are given a chance, they'll do considerably better?
Sure, very definitely.
Talking about youths, the Nigerians are calling for the scrapping of the Special Anti-Robbery Squad unit of the police force. Is this long overdue?
Well, one of the biggest problems we have as a country is that when we have a problem, instead of finding traditional ways of solving the problems and making them work, we create something new that creates new powers that then gets abused. I think the more that we can essentially try to develop basic institutions to respond to issues, the much better. I have heard talk about how, those kind of special agencies abuse young people and all of that. That's unacceptable. And we've got to find ways of ensuring that evidence is brought to bear to show this and consequence come from it. So I would definitely support anything that reduces abuse, because citizens have rights, and one of our biggest challenges in this country is that citizens don't exercise those rights, and a uniform in this country is the authority to bully. Once somebody gets a uniform, somehow they just lose it. I don't know what it is about the uniform in this country.
But in your opinion, who is to be blamed for the menace by SARS?
I've never encountered SARS. In fact, sometimes when I hear SARS, I wonder what it is. So, I really don't know about whether they're a menace, not a menace. I'm just the strength of what I hear in occasional conversation to say there's abuse going on. But I have really never encountered SARS.
Do you think there's a problem with the Nigerian police?
Oh, clearly, if we're performing efficiently, we won't be where we were. I mean, I hear there's a recent ranking in which Nigerian police was probably the worst in the world. I mean, one of the things I talk about is the loss of a sense of shame in Nigeria. If I was in authority, in a position of authority, I was whatever it is in the police force, and I read such a report, I would not be able to sleep. How can I be ranked the worst police force in the world? I don't know how true that report is or not is, but those kinds of things should make us lose sleep and then do something about it, because it's always possible to do something about whatever is not right.
What are some of the reforms you'd like to see happen in the Nigerian police force?
First and foremost, and people quibble back and forth around this, is that policing is a community function. And even Nigerian police talk about community policing. And so to have a centralized police force is a no-no. When I lived in America, the university that I went to had its police force. The city in which the university was located had its police force. The county in which that city was located had its own police force. The state had its own police force. And they say, oh, okay, local police has been used in Nigeria to abuse opposition and all of that. And I say, hey, is a federal police force not used to abuse opposition in Nigeria? What the Americans have done in their experience, for example, is that whenever an issue involves fundamental human rights, it's automatically an FBI issue, so that it's not the local force that gets involved.
Governor Rochas Okorocha just said that some of 89% of Nigerians are not satisfied with the Buhari regime. Do you agree with him?
My goodness. I don't know where he did the survey, and I'm not quite sure that Governor Rochas Okorocha is a role model for anything. So I just don't know. So I don't know. I just don't have enough information to debate with him on the matter.
Member of your party?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that I'm not sure where he's getting his information from.
But do you agree that this government has performed badly in the last 2 years?
Obviously, my positions on things come out on a daily basis, so people know what I feel about different things. It's not, I think there's excessive partisanship in Nigeria, and being a member of a party doesn't mean that you can't say that things are wrong or not right. Having said that, I think it's also important to bear in mind that this is a transition phase. We've just come from nearly 2 decades of a political party that had a setting culture, that had taken our country very, very far back. Unfortunately, I don't think that our party was as well organized when it got to power as it should be. And so a bit of hijack took place. A lot of work was done to show a way forward. I'm sure you have heard the Vice President mention several times that what was supposed to be the roadmap for the APC, the manifesto, was written in my house by himself, myself, and one or two others. And we worked on this over several months. It wasn't, I'm not sure that what we wrote is what we have quite seen. The one thing I know, because the idea came from me, that has been talked about a lot, is paying people 5,000 naira, school feeding. Those were very important plank issues that essentially a good source for it was Brazil. And we thought it was critical to what we do with ensuring that you empower to lift economic performance the most challenged in society. Conditional cash transfers is an idea that I've, been almost romantically involved with for quite some time, and Brazil gave me a proof positive for. So I don't think 2 years is enough to really judge a government that is trying to deal with nearly 20 years of pretty poor performance.
Oh, you don't think 2 years is enough?
No,
so how long are we supposed to give them to assess?
No. What I'm saying in the face of what it's dealing with. I'm not saying that this is the highest performance, but I think that if it's anybody to be held accountable for part of that poor performance, he should be Rochas himself. So I'm not sure that is the most appropriate source to get this number of 89% of Nigerians being unhappy.
As an individual, would you advise President Muhammadu Buhari to contest 2019 elections?
It's not my business to advise. There's a friend of mine who likes to say that there are two things you don't advise a man about: whether he should run for office or marry a new wife. I'm not quite sure I'm capable of stepping into the role of providing that advice.
But generally, how would you, looking at how the turnout of 2050 elections, how would you rather prefer 2019 elections to be?
No, I think that, look, Nigeria is in a place in its history where you need high performance governing, where you need a war cabinet. And I'm not so sure that the kind of style that I have seen is the best style to deal with a country in a moral equivalence of war.
Even with the comeback of the campaign of Atiku Abubakar, who has obviously shown interest in running for presidency 2019.
Now, how do you mean? I've said, what I just said is that Nigeria is in a moral equivalence of war. And we need like a war cabinet. And that this is not a time for, playing courtier politics. This is a time to get a high energy team. And I really, really think that we're in such a situation that we need to play down partisan items because our country is on the verge of dying. Look, what many people don't realize is that we have population growth at nearly 3%. We have a huge youth bulge. Right now, policy is as far as it can be from harvesting a demographic dividend. If Nigeria does not turn policy in the direction of investing heavily in education and healthcare and providing opportunities for these young people, what Nigeria will reap, it's already been written in a book by a fellow called Robert Kaplan, The Coming Anarchy. When that anarchy comes, it doesn't matter how much you've stolen from the treasury Doesn't matter what you've put away for your children. Everybody's going down. Do you see the Middle East? You see those cities in Syria. And that's what this country can very easily be if we don't realize what is at stake and all pull together to pull this country out of the mess that it is in right now.
So, since you so much know what, where we should be and how we should get there, how about you somehow, like I did say before, rally rounds, get the concerned professionals, the technocrats back into politics, and
We're trying to do that. Yes, sure, we're working on that.
And how do you ensure and convincing Nigerians that this movement would not be politically motivated?
The movement, that we're trying to create, the idea is to do X number of things. One, create a national consciousness about where we are as a country and what we must do. Bring in people who are apathetic into the political process. They can choose to go into and change the current parties because all of them need change. My view is that Nigeria really doesn't have a political party today, to be very frank with you, in terms of the classic definition of a political party. And the movement can itself create a new party, which can be a place for people who don't want to identify with this or that, and give the country momentum that will lead it where it should be going. That is a duty for any citizen today. And I'm committed as a citizen, as a patriot, to that thrust and giving it everything that I can. People forget how long I have been in the trenches, how many assassination attempts I've survived. I should just quietly go to one corner and go to retirement time. It's your generation that should be out on the streets. But there's too much docility. And so people like me are being asked, what are you going to do? How are you, when we should be retiring? I think that, we all need to take our responsibility. I was 19 when I created the first big challenge in this country. I was 21 when an article I wrote led to a cabinet reshuffle in this country. Young people should step up to bat. Olisabakoba, who says I dragged him into civil society, 1993, he went to lead the masses. They first slapped him and beat him up before they realized he was their leader. But that's part of the price you pay. And we must continue to pay what price, but we must bring in a new generation to begin to take up these responsibilities.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us for this interview. It's my pleasure to have had you. Thank you.
Great pleasure.
We all come from different backgrounds. That's what unites us. We all know life is about freedom of choice, and money transfer should be the same way. Introducing MoneyGram My Way. Send and receive money just about anywhere, using whatever method that works best for you.